If you've ever been bored in class before, or are otherwise familiar with the idea of an idle game, there's a pretty good chance you've played or at least heard of Cookie Clicker before. It's so simple that I wouldn't blame you for being hesitant to even call it a game, considering that all you really do is... And sure, there are funny news tickers as you progress through the different parts of the game, and it does get a little weird later on. But the gameplay loop never really shifts away from click on thing, get thing, spend thing to get more things. I mean, what else can you even say about Cookie Clicker other than you click the cookie? It has an elegant simplicity to it, and for the most part, the experience you get from playing the game for 3 hours is the same as 300 hours or 3,000 hours or 5 years. The key phrase there, though, is for the most part. Despite its overall simplicity, the game holds within itself a great deal of depth, complexity, and engaging mechanical design that lends itself well to long play hours and significant dedication. Before I actually start the video, I just really quickly want to give a rundown for how this video defines the term simple in regards to games, since it could mean a lot of different things depending on how you want to interpret it. For the sake of this video, a simple game is a game where the core gameplay loop remains essentially the same throughout the entire game, and where almost all actions that the player can perform are part of said core gameplay. That is to say, a simple game in the context of this video is a game where you can only really perform a few routines, and those routines never really change in a significant way. Anyway, back to Cookie Clicker, something that you will likely instantly notice is that there's no real question as to your objective. You make the number go up, and do that until you're satisfied. The other thing that you will likely instantly notice is that when you click the cookie for the first time, you get a little pop-up, an achievement. From the very beginning, the implication becomes that there is an end to the sandbox, a goal to reach, a point after which you will have done everything that the game thinks is important enough to warrant measurement. It gives the player a definitive goal and endpoint to latch onto and try and reach. This isn't exclusive to any specific kind of game, but for a game that lacks an abundance of different actions to perform, it helps to guide the player, and ideally to steer them to do the more fun and varied things that the game has to offer them, or to play in unique ways that are more interesting. A lot of the achievements, I'd say probably about a fourth, are related to the game's surprise mechanics, both the loot box kind and the more literal surprise mechanics, things that get introduced later and give the player new ways to do things without sidelining the primary gameplay. In the loot box way, the most effective way that the game keeps the player's attention is with random events, little cookies that show up and give you things, whatever the hell these things are, and the primary surprise mechanic, the minigames. There are 4 of them in total, the Garden, the Stock Market, the Pantheon, and the Grimoire, and they each provide a live, interactive addition that helps the player progress as well as unlock new achievements. Combined with all of this is the Prestige system. Basically, you start over completely, but with a permanent bonus to your production to help get you back up to where you were before faster. This allows the game to scale better as the cost of things increases the further into the game you get, and to achieve as high of a cookie production as you desire, more or less. To round this all off, you have the most obvious but simultaneously most difficult technique that a game can employ in order to keep someone playing, which is to just be fun. Part of the reason it is at all bearable to spend 3 hours watching a number go up and only occasionally doing things to make the number go up faster is that the core gameplay loop is well designed. Upgrade unlocks are logically spaced, achievements follow a consistent pattern, and the general pace of progression remains mostly constant until you've reached the point you should next prestige. Through this mechanical complexity, Cookie Clicker is able to vastly increase its overall playability and level of engagement. But what does that mean, really? What are the greater implications, like scientific and philosophical? If you aren't familiar with Voices of the Void, which will henceforth be referred to as VOTV for the sake of brevity, it's technically a horror game with sandbox elements, but most of the time it plays more like a sandbox game with light horror elements. The main premise of the game is that you play as a scientist named Dr. Kell working in a signal laboratory in the Alps. The primary gameplay usually consists of you performing all of your daily tasks as required to keep the base functioning and all of the radar dishes operational. While this is happening, however, you also have to deal with a series of occurrences, both extraterrestrial and supernatural, that threaten your safety, and you have to account for them in order to keep your base operational and yourself alive. Fun fact, this video was actually originally just supposed to be about Cookie Clicker and a different game called Bad North, but then I got a little too into Voices of the Void. Until at some point, late one night, in a sleep deprivation-induced mania, I realized that Voices of the Void is a great inverse demonstration of the strategies that Cookie Clicker uses. To make the comparison I'm trying to make here a little less opaque, the way I see it is that where Cookie Clicker contains beautiful complexity within outward simplicity, VOTV contains wonderful simplicity within outward complexity. All of the mechanics themselves are very comprehensive, understandable, and intuitive. Turn this dial, write down these numbers, push this button, dozens and dozens of superficially simple tasks compounding to create a vastly complex experience with an abundance of opportunity for player initiative. However, despite the overwhelming number of individual mechanics and activities that the player has access to, the game design is crafted to allow you to do basically whatever you want at whatever time. Instead of slowly revealing different mechanics to the player over time with specific benchmarks and unlock requirements, VOTV just throws you into the pool and lets you decide whether or not to drown yourself. For example, on its surface, the job, the theoretical main task of the game, sounds incredibly complicated. In a given day, the basic job that you have to do is lock onto a signal, download the signal, save the signal, transfer it onto a drive, use the world's slowest computer to denoise and increase the quality of the file, transfer it back, repeat up to 3 times, go to a satellite, get a hash code, go to another satellite, get a hash code, fall off a cliff, die, reload, redo some or all of that because you forgot to save, get the last hash code, put it all in a drive box, send it over to your asshole scientist colleagues, collapse from hunger, torture a potato in the microwave, burn your mouth, go to bed, wake up the next day, and then... What? Oh, not this shit again! So in addition to all the daily tasks I just mentioned, there's also the potential for them to be sidelined by the random chance for something awful to happen to you, ranging in scope and severity from a random light switch turning off to having to endure an entire day of something called bad sun. And in between all of this, between the job, the random horrible events, the game generally fucking with you, and avoiding both starvation and exhaustion, you can also go fishing, dig up stuff with a metal detector, clean the entire base, take up gardening, build this thing, and fix your oven. What? So how does this work? How does the game manage to remain at all coherent and guided with all of these things happening simultaneously? Well, it doesn't, and it doesn't have to. By making nearly every mechanic accessible from the very start of the game allows the player an extremely high degree of control over both their playstyle and their pace. This is a trade-off, of course. By doing this, by implementing so many different mechanics, the game makes itself less accessible to players who do not have the time or who do not want to expend the effort to learn all of them. The benefit of this trade-off, however, is that players get to experience the interplay and the fallout of the interactions between said mechanics. Want to burn all of those creepy mannequins you keep finding everywhere? Well, guess what? They also generate fuel you can use. Want to try and build that robot from earlier? Well, guess what? One of the parts is radioactive and will cause you to develop cancer if you stick around it for too long. The mechanics of VOTV are so interconnected that it can actually be quite difficult to only do one specific thing, depending on what it is you're trying to do. This all ties back into that player initiative, though. By doing this, the game provides pretty much any problem you could possibly encounter with at least 2 solutions, and probably more. It means that in any given scenario, if you want to do one thing, there are probably a lot of different ways you can do it, depending on your preferred playstyle and the way that you enjoy conducting your gameplay. This is useful from a game design standpoint because it means that you can entrust the player to have more agency and rely less on one specific mechanic to do something. And it's useful from a player standpoint because it means that if you really, really hate one of the mechanics for some reason, you don't necessarily have to use it or interact with it. Both of the strategies mentioned here are equally valid when developing a game, and usually the end towards which a game leans is more dependent on the developer's vision for the player than anything else. Games like Lethal Company or Voices of the Void are distinguished from games like Cookie Clicker, not only in terms of genre, but also in terms of the weight that is placed on the player's actions. More often than not, the reason that bad things end up happening to you is because of your own recklessness. And likewise, most of the best things that end up happening to you are due to your ability to innovate as a player and be observant of the ways that different mechanics interact. Likewise with Cookie Clicker, the game doesn't need to be an expansive sandbox experience with procedurally generated tree stumps and over 5 quintillion lines of dialogue, because the goal of the game is to provide a complex, but easily graspable and repetitive task that allows the game to be relaxing and low stakes. When you want the main engagement of a game to stem from the consequences of the player's actions, you give them more actions to perform, and you make the mechanics interactive and fluid to reflect that. And when you want the main engagement of a game to come from the mechanics themselves, you make those mechanics in-depth, central to the gameplay, and enjoyable. No mic drop ending this time. I've said what I wanted to say, so this is the end of the actual video. I do have a few more things I want to say, but they're not strictly relevant, so feel free to leave if you want. Anyway, you may have noticed that this video was much shorter and very tonally different from the last one, which is for two reasons. Firstly, not every game is Hotline Miami. In fact, most games aren't. And a video about the impact mechanical choices have on player experience usually doesn't need to be as long as a meta-analysis. And secondly, I wanted to use this video as an excuse to develop my editing and visual presentation, as well as to give a glimpse into another kind of video that I'll probably end up making a lot of, which is comparative analysis. In the future, it probably won't be something as simple as, look at what this game does, and look at what this game does. So, sorry about that. Also, sorry about the bitrate for some of these clips, but I was recording fast-moving footage with a shaky camera in a dark environment, so I did the best I could without instantly filling my hard drive with footage. Actually, very quickly, before I end the video for real, how was the audio this time around? I tried a few things differently from last time, which hopefully ended up with it sounding better, but I'm not sure, so let me know which one you liked more. I tried to make my audio crisper and more isolated and also more consistent this time around, but yeah, just let me know. Okay, anyway, bye.